Hey, I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I've got to give you a legal disclaimer required by the Florida Bar. This podcast isn't legal advice, but I'm going to give you insights about the disability insurance world, the games the carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. Disability carriers are not in the business of paying disability claims. That just doesn't help their bottom line. The golden rule is they're going to collect your premium dollar and they're going to rule that you are not disabled. And one of the most common tools in the disability carrier's arsenal that they'll use at all stages of a claim is the field interview. Now, in the first part of this episode, I talked about the mistakes that you can make in giving a statement without representation, letting the disability rats visit your house, mishandling questions about your medical condition, making mistakes in answering questions about why you can't work, making mistakes in answering questions about your treatment, the side effects of medication, and the results you're having from treatment, and mistakes that you're making in answering questions about your restrictions and limitations. In today's episode, I am going to be focusing on restrictions and limitations because this really is the heart of questioning that they will ask you. That's going to lay the foundation for other questions and ultimately a claim termination. So let's first talk about why the carrier is asking all these questions about your activity of daily living when your doctor's already filled out forms and the common restrictions and limitations questions. Remember, if you're being called or contacted about a field interview, you are being set up for a claims denial. You need protection from yourself, yes, I said yourself, and from the carrier. Are you ready to learn more about the mistakes that you can make in a field interview and hear another story about what the impact of those mistakes are? Great. Stay tuned. I'll be back in a second.
Have you been robbed of your peace of mind from your disability insurance carrier? You owe it to yourself to get a copy of Robbed of Your Peace of Mind, which provides you with everything you need to know about the long-term disability claim process. Request your free copy of the book at caveylaw.com today.
Welcome back. So why? Why is the disability carrier asking all of those questions about your activity of daily living when your doctor's already filled out these forms? Now, I'm spending 4 episodes of this podcast to talk about the field interview. I've seen too many claims denied because the policyholder thought, look, if I just talk with the insurance company representative or I meet with them, everything's going to be fine. They're going to see that I'm disabled. They're going to see that I'm entitled to my benefits. Sorry to disappoint you. Your claim is in trouble if the long-term disability carrier calls you to take a statement or arrange a field visit. Now, I will tell you, it's not necessarily in trouble in an initial application because statements are common, but nonetheless, you still need representation and preparation in this statement. But my experience is if you are being set up for a statement or a field visit while you're on diary or being paid benefits, they're setting you up for a claims denial. So the purpose of the visit is first to determine if there's objective evidence of disability because your actions contradict what you say you can do, what you're telling your doctor, and what they have shot you on surveillance doing. Now, they're also going to be taking this statement because your doctor is relying on what you've had to say and is rendering their opinion about your functionality based on what you've told them. And that opinion is faulty and unreliable because you misrepresented to the doctor what you can and cannot do. And they're taking this statement to prove that there's no causal relationship between your disability and your restrictions and limitations and your inability to engage in your own or any other occupation. They don't like the restrictions and limitations assigned by your doctor. They want to punch holes in those restrictions and limitations. Now, I want you to remember, if you're at the your own occupation stage, you have to prove that you can't do the material and substantial duties of your occupation as defined by policy, not your job, your occupation. And if your job, or occupation rather, is sedentary in nature, then they're really going to be trying to punch holes in those restrictions and limitations because they want to prove that you can go back to doing some or all the material and substantial duties of your sedentary occupation. If you're at the any occupation stage, you have to prove that you can't do the material and substantial duties of any occupation by virtue of your training, education, experience, the skills that you've learned, and those restrictions and limitations. Different standard of disability, but a similar game here, okay? Now, I know that generally when we are on claim or diary and you're being paid benefits, the disability carrier probably already has surveillance on you and they are trying to set you up for that claims denial. They have a laundry list of questions that they're going to ask to help justify that claims denial or termination. Now, that isn't to say that they may not have surveillance on you at the initial application stage. I generally don't see that. But what I do see is the same game. Because once they take your statement, they identify discrepancies, they're going to take that information to your treating physician and ask them to sign off on a letter that says you are capable of at least engaging in sedentary work. So what they've done is they've sprung a trap on you for the purposes of painting you as a liar, a malingerer, or a fraud so that they can justify a claim denial or termination. Now, I think that you need the assistance of an experienced disability attorney, and you need to be prepared. You want to be with someone such as myself who's reviewed your policy, your medical records, reviewed the forms you completed, discuss the format of and the questions with the adjuster in advance and try to negotiate what those questions are going to be, has prepared and practiced with you the questions and the answer, and someone who will protect you during the statement and manage that statement. I'm always trying to control how that statement is going and what the adjuster is asking. So today, I want you to make sure that you understand that the types of questions that you're going to get are not as simple as they may sound, and that each question is a trap. So let's start covering those questions in a minute. Let's take a quick break.
The next 24 hours, we are giving away free copies of the Disability Insurance Claim Survival Guide for Professionals. Order yours today at disabilityclaimsforprofessionals.com.
Welcome back. All right, welcome back. Are you ready? We're going to be covering mistakes number 7 through 12. And these are questions that involve issues about restrictions and limitations. The questions are going to be about sitting, walking, standing, lifting, bending, twisting, squatting, kneeling, pushing, pulling, reaching, climbing, balance, and the use of your hands. Now, these topics are pretty exhaustive, and you can spend minutes or even hours talking about each one of these issues, but let's give you a quick overview. Mistake number 7 is questions about your restrictions and limitations in sitting. Now, this is a crucial question, and I'm not joking. If your own occupation involves sitting, the carrier's game is to show that you can sit long enough on your rear end that you can do this job. If you are at the own occupation stage and your job is sedentary, the game is on. They want to show that you can sit at least 6 out of 8 hours a day. Why? Because if you can do that, you can do sedentary work. And the same game exists if you are at the any occupation stage, because quite frankly, all they have to do is to show that you can engage in sedentary work and that based on the skills that you've learned, based on your experience, based on your training, there is some other mythical, not real world occupation that you can do that requires you to do sedentary work so that voila, they can terminate your benefits. So the questions about sitting can include, what's the maximum number of hours you can sit at one time? What's the maximum number of hours can you sit during this day? Now, there's a trap right there. They didn't ask minutes, they asked hours. That question is clearly misleading and designed to have you commit to hours and not minutes. And you can't give a hard and fast answer. I'm sure your ability to sit and stand depends on whether you're having a good day or a bad day, what you might have done the day before, what medication you're taking. Now, Interestingly, that question doesn't ask, do you have to alternate sitting and standing? What problems do you have standing that interfere with your ability to function? How long do you have to sit before you develop symptoms that interfere with your ability to engage in activities of daily living? So how often do you have to alternate sitting and standing? And in fact, do you have to get in your recliner? Do you have to get in bed? Those questions are not asked. Regardless of the questions, I want you to qualify your answers so you're narrowing it in its scope into minutes and addressing your need to alternate sitting and standing. Mistake number 8, standing. You're going to be asked, how long can you stand? But it might be, what's the maximum number of minutes you can stand, or what's the maximum number of hours you can stand? Big difference. What happens to you after you stand that length of time? Does your pain level increase after you stand for that long? And what symptoms do you have when you stand for that long? Now, interestingly, again, what they're not asking is your need to alternate sitting and standing. How problems stand interfere with your ability to function. How long you can stand before you develop symptoms that require you to change positions. Now, as I've said before, disability carriers use surveillance, and they may have a picture of you doing something you say that you can't do. You may say, look, I can only stand for 15 minutes, and they've got a tape of you standing longer than you said you could. They're going to argue that you have not been truthful to your doctor about your abilities, and they're going to question your doctor's reliance on your statements. So don't fall into that trap, and make sure you're giving ranges. Good days, bad days, days you can do more. Mistake number 9, walking. Okay. Well, we all walk. We all walk every day. We walk sometimes around the block. We might walk in the grocery store. So they may ask you, how much can you walk? How far can you walk at one time? How far can you walk before your pain level increases? Without defining the term pain level on a scale of 1 to 10. How does your pain level increase? What happens if you walk too far? Well, what is too far? They haven't defined that. They let you define that. I don't like that. How much walking do you do during the day while performing activities like taking your children to school? Do you take them out of the car and walk them into the school? Do you go to the grocery store? How far do you walk in the grocery store? Or how much walking do you do from the parking lot of your doctor's office into the doctor's office? Do you spread your walking around? In other words, do you one day walk a lot in the grocery store and then the next day take a walk in the park? So they're trying to figure out whether or not you are, or how you're scheduling your walking and how you may spread it out. And back in the days when people walked in the mall, they may say, well, how far do you walk in the mall? They may ask you, but rarely do they, do you sit down when you take a walk? And here's the killer question. Do you walk with a limp? How often do you walk with a limp? I promise you, they will have a picture of you walking without a limp when you said that you limp all the time, okay? Do you need a cane or an assistive device? If you say, I use it all the time, and they have a picture of you not using it all the time, you are causing them to question your credibility. When you go grocery shopping, are you hanging onto the cart? Or do you have to use the cart, the electric cart? And if so, how often? And again, they're trying to catch you. If they ask you those kinds of questions, my little radar antenna are buzzing because I think they've got surveillance of you. Do you carry things when you walk? Well, of course you do. If you're a woman, you got a purse, okay? So if so, how heavy? Now, some purses can weigh, less than a pound, and some of them look like a suitcase. So you have got to make sure that you understand that ultimately this is not only a question about walking, but a question about lifting. Now, I want you to think about these questions and your answers so that you can explain what you can and cannot do. You can also need to be able to explain how your pain and medications impact your activities. And you have to explain good days and bad days. As I've said, never say never. Don't say I never walk. I never walk more than a block. I never fill in the blank. They will have a picture of you doing what you said you never did. And You also should never say always. Don't say, I always use a cane. I always walk with a limp. I always fill in the blank. I promise you that they're going to have a picture of you doing what you said not doing what you always said you did. Okay? So ranges, good days, bad days, no absolute answers that they can hang their hats on. All right? Let's take a quick break.